The crunch of autumn leaves beneath my shoes felt louder than usual, echoing through the silence of my heart, as if the earth itself wanted to announce my arrival. My son Tyler, only 11 years old, clutched my hand so tightly it was almost painful. But the ache in my fingers was nothing compared to the dagger twisting in my chest. Through the thin glass of my mother's kitchen window, I heard the two voices I trusted most. My husband Brandon's steady, familiar tone and my mother's sharp, unforgiving laugh. Their words sliced into me crueler than any wound I could imagine. "She's so broken, Helen. Always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore." It was Brandon's voice, low but firm, and each syllable hit me like a slap. My breath caught in my throat, the warmth of life draining from my face. Then my mother's reply came laced with disdain, the same tone she'd used my entire childhood whenever she told me I wasn't good enough. "I told you not to marry her, didn't I? Always said she was too weak for a man like you, too damaged." Damaged. That word echoed inside me like a bell tolling at a funeral, my funeral. I felt Tyler's small hand trembling against mine. He didn't understand the full weight of what we were hearing, but he knew enough to sense the horror in my silence. I pressed a finger to my lips, begging him not to speak, not to move, not to draw attention to our presence. Inside, I was crumbling, yet on the outside, I forced myself into stillness. Then Brandon spoke again, his tone casual, almost bored, as if he were discussing the weather rather than dismantling my existence. The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while, but now that's almost gone. I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic. My knees nearly gave out. The insurance money. The money I thought we'd been saving for Tyler's education, for our family's future. It had been nothing more than bait, his reason for marrying me, for staying with me, for pretending to love me. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, desperate not to cry out and give myself away. My mother's voice followed, dripping with cruel delight. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to leave her. Take everything. She's too weak, too broken. She won't even fight me. She'll just cry and accept it like she always does." And then they laughed. That laughter, my husband and my mother united in mockery of me, was the moment something inside me shattered. Or maybe something inside me was reborn. A part of me died that night, yes, the part that still believed in love, in family and loyalty. But from those ashes, another version of me emerged. Cold, focused, a woman with nothing left to lose. I pulled Tyler away from the window before my trembling legs gave way, guiding him silently back to the car. My heart was a storm, but my face wore the mask of calm. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They thought I would do nothing but cry. They were wrong. 3 months earlier, my life had looked almost perfect, or at least the closest thing to perfect I thought someone like me could deserve. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've lived with the gnawing belief that I wasn't good enough for happiness, for love, for anything better than scraps of affection. The morning that changed everything began so simply. I woke up in our little 3-bedroom home on Maple Street, the house Brandon and I bought when Tyler was just 2. It was the house where I believed we would raise our son, grow old together, and watch our dreams slowly come true. Brandon was already up, freshly showered, dressed in his work uniform. He was the kind of man people admired in our small town of Riverside. Handsome, capable, respected. He managed a construction company, and everywhere we went, men wanted to shake his hand, while women whispered about his charm. And me, I never quite understood why he chose me. "Morning, beautiful," he said, brushing a kiss across my forehead as I shuffled into the kitchen, still wearing my old bathrobe. "Coffee's ready." My heart fluttered the same way it had since our very first date 12 years ago. Even after all the storms we had weathered, that simple gesture still had the power to make me feel chosen, cherished. I smiled, wrapping my hands around the warm mug he had prepared just the way I liked it. Tyler wandered in minutes later, his hair a wild mess, his arms and legs stretching into the awkwardness of boyhood. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Dad," he mumbled before grabbing toast and devouring it in 3 bites. Brandon laughed, ruffling our son's hair. "Slow down, buddy. Breakfast isn't going anywhere." The sight of them together made my chest ache with gratitude. This was my family. These 2 people were my world. Without them, I was nothing. Or at least that's what I thought then. I want to pause here because memory has a cruel way of replaying these moments with a sharper edge once you know the truth. That morning, as I stirred cream into my coffee, I told Brandon Mom called yesterday. She wants us to come visit this weekend. For just an instant, so quick I almost doubted myself, I saw something flicker in his eyes. His jaw tightened, his smile faltered, but then it was gone, replaced with easy charm. Sure, sweetheart, whatever you want. Looking back, I should have noticed. I should have asked why the mention of my mother made him tense. But I was too blinded by gratitude that they got along at all, too desperate to believe I was blessed with a husband who respected my mother. So I let it go. And that was my first mistake. At the library where I worked part-time, life seemed quiet, ordinary. Books were my sanctuary, silent companions that had carried me through childhood when my mother's sharp criticisms made home feel like a battlefield. Working among shelves and stories felt safe, like I could hide inside their words. That afternoon, while shelving books, I overheard two coworkers talking. One of them, Janet, said casually, "I saw Brandon at the diner yesterday, with Helen. Looked pretty cozy if you ask me." Helen, my mother. The words froze me mid-step. I told myself there had to be an innocent reason. Maybe Brandon had run into her. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. But deep in my stomach, a cold knot began to form. A knot that would grow tighter with each passing day until it finally strangled the naive trust I had wrapped around myself like a blanket. That night when Brandon came home late, covered in dust and exhaustion from work, I told myself it was normal. He kissed me, said he loved me, and I let myself believe him. But when I looked out the window and saw his truck sparkling clean, no dirt, no grit, no sign of a construction site, I felt that knot twist even harder. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing my mind. He had chosen me, hadn't he? He loved me, didn't he? But doubt once planted grows like weeds, and mine were just beginning to take root. I replay that night outside my mother's house 1,000 times in my head. Standing in the shadows, Tyler's trembling hand in mine, I listened to the two people who should have been my safe place, conspiring like predators circling prey. It is strange how pain sharpens the senses. The chill of the evening air dug into my skin. The smell of damp soil from my mother's garden clung to my clothes. The faint flicker of her living room lamp cast silhouettes of their bodies moving inside. Every detail burned into me like a photograph etched by fire. I wanted to burst into scream, to demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was Tyler, his wide eyes brimming with confusion. Maybe it was the realization that confronting them now would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. So instead, I drove us home in silence, my heart pounding, my hands clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles ached white. Tyler finally spoke as we pulled into the driveway. "Mom, why was Dad there with Grandma?" His voice was so small, so fragile that it shattered me more than Brandon's cruelty had. I forced a smile I didn't feel, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be okay." But inside I didn't believe that, not yet. The following days were a blur of pretending. Pretending I didn't know the truth. Pretending Brandon's kisses still warmed me. Pretending my mother's phone calls didn't make bile rise in my throat. At night when Brandon snored beside me, I lay awake, my mind replaying every moment of our marriage. Had it all been a lie? I remembered the way he held me after Tyler was born, whispering that I was the strongest woman he knew. I remembered how he danced with me in the kitchen, our bare feet sliding on linoleum, our laughter rising like music. I remembered how when my father died, Brandon told me he would never let me face grief alone. But now I saw it differently. The tenderness, the comfort, it hadn't been love. It had been strategy. A performance designed to secure the money my father left behind. That realization hurt more than anything, because it meant I had built my entire adult life on sand, and the tide was finally pulling it all away. My mother, too, haunted me. Growing up, she had always been a storm I could never predict. Some days, she was tender, brushing my hair and telling me I could do anything I wanted in life. Other days, she was cruel, calling me weak, mocking my dreams, comparing me to girls who were thinner, prettier, stronger. I spent my childhood chasing her approval like sunlight through clouds, always believing if I tried hard enough I could make her proud. But that night at her window, when I heard her laugh at my pain, I realized she never wanted me to shine. She wanted me to stay small, controllable, easy to mock, and Brandon had given her the perfect opportunity. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about alliance. My husband and my mother united in tearing me apart. I decided not to confront them immediately. Rage would have been satisfying, but it wouldn't have been enough. They saw me as weak, broken. If I lashed out too soon, it would only prove them right. No, I needed to be smart, careful, patient, so I began to watch. Brandon thought I was blind, but I saw the way he lingered on his phone, smirking at texts I wasn't meant to see. He thought I was deaf, but I heard the way his voice softened when he stepped outside to take calls, the way his laugh turned intimate in a way it never did with me anymore. He thought I was silent, but in truth, I was collecting. Every receipt, every unexplained trip, every change in his routine, I stored them all. At the same time, I began to distance myself from my mother. No more long visits, no more eager attempts to win her approval. Instead, I let her think she had won. I answered her calls with polite detachment, never letting her see the fury boiling underneath. She wanted me broken. I would let her believe I was. But behind closed doors, I was planning. One evening, while Brandon showered, I slipped his phone into my hand. My pulse raced, my ears ringing with the sound of rushing blood. I knew the passcode. It was Tyler's birthday, the same number Brandon used for everything. That familiarity made me sick. The messages were worse than I feared. Not just flirtation, not just betrayal. Plans, meetings, exchanges of money, promises whispered to my mother in digital ink. Don't worry, Helen. She'll fold when I ask for the divorce. She won't fight. She never does. I can't wait until it's just us without her weakness dragging everything down. I couldn't read anymore. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. But I had what I needed now. Proof. That night, as Brandon slept, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the stack of journals I had kept over the years. I had filled them with my feelings, loneliness, fear, the small humiliations I never told anyone. But now I realized they weren't just journals. They were evidence. A record of my slow unraveling at the hands of two people who should have loved me. I whispered to myself over and over as if to carve it into my bones. You are not weak. You are not broken. You will not cry quietly this time. The next family gathering came 2 weeks later. My mother invited us for Sunday dinner, her tone cheerful on the phone. Brandon encouraged it too, as if nothing were amiss. I went, but not as the Rebecca they expected. I dressed carefully, deliberately, my best dress makeup, sharp hair shining. When I arrived with Tyler, my mother arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Brandon tried to kiss my cheek, but I turned away. All through dinner, their words buzzed around me like flies, but I didn't swat them away. I smiled, nodded, played the part. I let them think they were in control. Until dessert. As my mother served pie, I pulled out my phone and laid it on the table. The screen glowed with the messages between her and Brandon, the words they thought I'd never see. The silence that followed was suffocating. Brandon's face went pale. My mother's hand froze midair, the pie server clattering onto the plate. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry, I simply said I know. For the first time, it was they who looked broken. And in that moment, I realized I had shifted the balance. The woman they thought too weak to fight back had just declared war. The silence at my mother's dinner table that night will haunt me forever. For years, I had been the one silenced by Brandon's mocking smiles, by my mother's cold words, by my own fear of losing what little love I thought I had. But this time, it was different. This time, it was them staring back at me speechless, while their secrets burned under the glow of my phone screen. I know, I repeated, my voice calm but steady, like steel sharpened by years of cutting wounds. My mother's lips pressed together in a thin line. She set down the pie server, folded her hands, and tried to reclaim her composure. Rebecca, she said slowly, as though speaking to a child you've misunderstood. Brandon shifted uncomfortably, his face pale, his fingers tightening around the edge of his chair. He started to open his mouth, but I raised my hand to silence him. For once, he obeyed. I heard you, I said, my voice trembling now, but not with weakness, with fury contained just enough to cut. Outside your house, that night. I heard everything. How you laughed at me, how you called me broken, how you planned to take everything and leave me in ruins. Tyler looked between us, his eyes wide confusion and fear etched across his young face. My heart ached for him, but I couldn't stop now. He needed to see that I wasn't the weak mother they thought I was. He needed to see that I could stand. My mother leaned back in her chair, her smile bitter. And what exactly do you plan to do with this knowledge? You think anyone will believe you over me, over him? She gestured toward Brandon, her tone laced with arrogance. That laugh, that condescension, it sparked something in me I didn't know was there. A kind of fire that burned away the last remnants of fear. I don't need them to believe me, I said. I only need you to know that I won't be silent anymore. Brandon slammed his fist on the table, startling Tyler so badly he flinched. Enough, he roared, his mask cracking, the charming husband gone. You think you can stand against me, against us? I met his eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't look away. I don't think I whispered. I know. The dinner ended in chaos. My mother stormed out muttering about ungrateful daughters, her heels clacking like gunshots against the floor. Brandon followed her, his hand clamped on her arm, whispering frantically. They left me and Tyler alone at the table, the untouched pie cooling between us. Tyler reached for my hand. Mom, are we going to be okay? I squeezed his fingers, forcing a smile through my tears. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be okay, because we're not going to let them win. The days that followed were a strange blur of quiet rage and cautious planning. Brandon pretended nothing had happened, slipping back into the role of the affectionate husband, the caring father. He kissed my forehead in the mornings, asked about my day in the evenings, and sat beside me on the couch at night, as though our world hadn't just cracked open. But I wasn't fooled anymore. Every touch, every smile, every word was a performance, and I was no longer his audience. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages, bank statements showing withdrawals I never authorized, notes of conversations where his mask slipped even for a moment. I hid copies in places he'd never think to look, the bottom of Tyler's toy chest, a box of old Christmas decorations in the attic, a sealed envelope at the library where I worked. I was building a fortress of truth, and yet part of me still ached. Late at night, when Tyler was asleep and the house was quiet, I would sit in the dark and remember the man I thought I had married. The one who danced with me in the kitchen, who held me when my father died, who whispered promises of forever. Was that man ever real? Or had it all been a mask from the start? The grief of losing him, losing who I thought he was, felt almost as heavy as the betrayal itself. The next confrontation came not at home, but at church. We were sitting in the pew, Tyler beside me, Brandon's arm draped casually across the back of my shoulders. My mother sat 2 rows ahead, her hat perfectly positioned, her posture immaculate as though she were a queen surveying her kingdom. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, about family, about trust. Each word cut into me like a blade. My eyes burned with unshed tears, my hands twisting the edge of my skirt until the fabric wrinkled beneath my fingers. Brandon leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. No one will ever believe you, he whispered, his voice laced with venom. You'll destroy yourself trying. I turned my head, meeting his smirk with a steadiness that surprised even me. We'll see, I murmured. It was then that I realized the true shape of my battle. This wasn't just about exposing him, it was about reclaiming myself, my voice, my strength. The storm broke 1 week later. Brandon came home late, his eyes bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled. Tyler was asleep and I was waiting in the living room, my phone in my hand. Where have you been? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. He sneered. Work, you know that. I held up the phone. Funny, because your GPS says you were at Mom's house. Again. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing into anger. You're spying on me now. I'm surviving you, I replied. He lunged forward, snatching the phone from my hand, but I didn't flinch. I have copies, I said evenly. Every message, every receipt, every lie. You can smash that phone to pieces, but the truth won't die with it. His face twisted with rage, but beneath it I saw something else. Fear. And that was when I knew I had won, even if the war was far from over. That night after he stormed out, I sat on the couch in silence, Tyler's soft snores drifting down the hallway. My chest ached, my hands trembled, but my heart was steady. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They thought I would crumble under the weight of their betrayal. But they were wrong. I was just beginning. Brandon didn't come home until morning. When he finally stumbled through the door, he reeked of whiskey and smoke, his eyes bloodshot and his face twisted into something hard, almost feral. For years, I had looked at him and seen my husband, my partner, the man I once believed in. But now, as I watched him toss his jacket on the floor and glare at me like I was an intruder in my own home, I saw only a stranger. "Don't look at me like that," he growled, his voice hoarse from shouting or drinking or both. "You think you've won something? You think waving around a few screenshots and whispers makes you strong?" I stayed seated on the couch, my hands folded in my lap, my voice calm. "I don't think, Brandon." "I know." He sneered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Pathetic. Always pretending to be more than you are. You were nothing when I found you, Rebecca. Broken, weak, I gave you a life. And this is how you repay me." His words stung, but less than they once would have. Because now I understood the truth, he had never given me a life. I had built it myself, piece by piece, even while he chipped away at me. "I was never nothing," I whispered. "You just needed me to believe that." For the first time, his face faltered. That day, I went to see a lawyer. I didn't tell Brandon. I didn't tell my mother. I walked into the office on Maple Avenue with shaking hands and a heart that pounded like a drum, but I walked out with something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The lawyer explained what evidence I would need: financial records, proof of infidelity, documentation of emotional abuse. As she spoke, I realized I already had most of it. The journals, the bank statements, the messages. I had been preparing for this battle without even knowing it. "You're stronger than you think," she told me, her eyes kind but firm. "And the law is on your side." Those words wrapped around me like armor. When Brandon discovered I had met with a lawyer, he exploded. He shouted so loudly that Tyler woke in the middle of the night, standing in the hallway in his pajamas with tears streaming down his face. "You're tearing this family apart!" Brandon roared, slamming his fist against the wall. "You'll regret this, Rebecca. I'll make sure you have nothing." I pulled Tyler into my arms, shielding him from the storm of his father's rage. "We already have nothing," I said softly. "All we had was a lie." Brandon stared at me, chest heaving, but I didn't look away. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of his fury, because fear was his weapon and I had just taken it away. The days that followed were a blur of maneuvers, each of us circling the other, like predators waiting to strike. Brandon tried to charm me, then threatened me, then ignored me entirely. My mother called constantly, her voice dripping with venom. "You're ruining your marriage," she hissed one evening. "Do you know how many women would kill to have a husband like Brandon? You've always been ungrateful." I laughed bitterly. If betrayal and cruelty are blessings, then maybe I am ungrateful. "You'll regret this," she warned. "You'll end up alone. No man will ever want you after this." Her words echoed the fears that had haunted me since girlhood. But now they rang hollow, because I realized I would rather be alone than shackled to people who thrived on my pain. The climax came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday evening when I returned home to find Brandon waiting in the living room, my journals scattered across the coffee table. He had found them. He looked up, his smile cold. "So this is your plan? Scribbled pity parties in notebooks. Who do you think will believe this nonsense?" My pulse raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Those notebooks are just the beginning. I have more, Brandon. Copies. Proof. You can tear those pages apart, but the truth won't disappear." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, but you're not. You're weak, and weak people don't win." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Weak people survive. Strong people fight. And I've learned to do both." For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw the flicker of fear behind his eyes. He knew the walls were closing in. The real explosion happened at a family gathering 2 weeks later. My parents had insisted we all come together, hoping to work things out. I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I was ready for war. The living room was crowded, the air heavy with tension. My mother sat in her armchair, her lips pursed, Brandon beside her, like an obedient son rather than a husband. My father, frail and tired, watched from the corner, his eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "You've made a fool of yourself." my mother began, her voice sharp. Dragging our family name through the mud, airing private matters. I cut her off. Private matters. You mean like the nights I stood outside your window and listened to you and Brandon laugh about how broken I am, or the texts where you planned my ruin together? Gasps rippled through the room. My father looked stricken, his hand trembling on the armrest. Helen, is this true? My mother's face flushed crimson. She's lying, twisting everything. You know how dramatic she is. I turned to my father, my hands shaking, but my voice clear. Dad, I have proof. Messages, records, years of cruelty. I'm done being silent. Brandon leapt to his feet, his voice booming. You can't prove anything. I met his fury with quiet certainty. I already have. And then for the first time in my life, I laid it all bare. I handed my father the folder I had prepared, copies of the texts, the financial records, the evidence of betrayal. His hands trembled as he read, his face pale, his eyes wet. The room erupted. My mother shouting, Brandon swearing, relatives gasping and whispering. But through it all I stood tall. For once I wasn't the broken one, the silent one, the one mocked and dismissed. I was the truth teller. I was the storm they never saw coming. That night Brandon packed a bag and left. My mother screamed at me, cursed me, told me I was no daughter of hers. But her words no longer cut me. They slid off me like water off stone, because I had already won. Not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy me. When Brandon stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the years I had wasted, relief that the masquerade was finally over. For the first time in over a decade, I stood in my mother's living room, not as a daughter, begging for love, nor as a wife begging for respect, but as a woman reclaiming herself. My father reached for me, his old hand trembling as it wrapped around mine. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. I should have protected you better. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. You don't have to be sorry, Dad. You just have to see me now. And he did. For the first time in years, I saw it, the pride in his eyes. Pride that wasn't borrowed or conditional. Pride that belonged to me. My mother, however, unleashed her venom like never before. You've ruined this family, she spat, her face twisted in rage. You'll regret this. Alone, unwanted, forgotten, that's what you'll be. Her words once had the power to cut me to the bone. But that night they fell flat echoes of an old curse that no longer bound me. I stood taller, my voice steady, as I said I'd rather be alone than chained to people who thrive on my pain. She gasped, as if I had struck her, but I didn't flinch. I turned and walked out, Tyler's small hand tucked firmly in mine. The weeks after Brandon's departure were not easy. He fought dirty, as I knew he would. He tried to paint me as unstable, sent cruel messages, even tried to manipulate Tyler. My mother backed him at every turn, whispering poison into the ears of relatives and neighbors. But I had my fortress of truth. I had evidence. I had my journals. And most importantly, I had my voice. The court battle was grueling, but I endured. Each time I sat in that courtroom, Brandon glared at me like I was his enemy. And maybe I was. But unlike him, my weapons weren't lies or manipulation. They were truth and resilience. My lawyer presented the messages, the financial records, the documentation of years of emotional abuse. Brandon's mask cracked piece by piece until the charming husband everyone admired was nothing more than a hollow shell. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, granting me custody of Tyler and control of our home, I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed deeply and freely for what felt like the first time in years. Life after betrayal is not a fairy tale. It is messy, painful, and full of nights when the silence feels heavier than any shouted insult. I cried, I raged, I doubted myself. But I also healed. Tyler and I built new routines. Saturday morning pancakes, movie nights on the couch, long walks in the park where he asked questions I didn't always know how to answer. Sometimes he looked at me with worry, far too old for his 11 years, but I reminded him over and over that we were safe now. That he didn't have to carry the weight of his father's cruelty or his grandmother's disdain. We were free. And me, I started to write again. Not just journals of pain, but stories of survival. Pages filled with hope, with lessons, with the reminder that even in the darkest betrayal, light can be found. One evening, Tyler asked me, Mom, do you still love Dad? The question pierced me. I thought carefully before answering. I love the man I thought he was. But the man he chose to be, I can't love that. He nodded as if he understood more than a boy his age should. I'm glad you're strong now. Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him close. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. My strength wasn't just for me. It was for him. It was for the little boy who needed to see his mother stand tall so he would know how to stand one day too. Months passed. The leaves turned, the snow fell, the seasons shifted. Brandon faded from our lives, his power over me dissolved like ash and rain. My mother remained cold, distant, bitter to the end, but her voice no longer ruled me. Her disapproval no longer defined me. She could spit venom until her last breath and I would still walk tall. Because I had learned the most painful, liberating truth of all: family is not always love. Sometimes family is betrayal and sometimes survival means walking away. I am Rebecca. I am 32 years old. I am a mother. I am a survivor. And I am no longer broken. To those who listen to my story, who feel echoes of their own pain in mine, please know this: you are stronger than they want you to believe. You are not weak for surviving. You are not broken for crying. And when the time comes, you will find your voice too. It may start as a whisper, but one day it will rise into a roar. If my story touched you, if it gave you courage or reminded you of your own strength, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories of truth and survival. And I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to walk away from betrayal and what gave you the strength to do it. Because none of us are truly alone, and sometimes sharing our voices is how we set each other free.